How was the food? It was good? Because if it's not, it's going to bode very well for my presentation, which is about, as you can see, it's about taste. This presentation is sort of a meditation on one word, trying to follow it through to hopefully a point by the end. So bear with me. Interestingly enough, the Hindus had categorized taste into 6 different categories. And of that, they had 163 what they referred to as flavorful combinations. The Chinese have a saying, which was north salty, south sweet. The east was spicy, and the west is what? What have we missed? The west is sour. Don't read into it. They said the west was sour. When we think of taste, taste seems to take, for many of us, the lower rung on the totem pole, so to speak. That if we were confronted with the choice of losing one of our senses, I know you've all considered this at one point, which one would you actually forfeit? Well, sight and hearing, those are untouchable because we need them for communication. So those probably aren't on your top 10 list, top 4 list, 5 list, 5 senses. Okay. Then we have the remaining 3, which are taste, and smell. Now, smell and touch, well, touch is very important. Smell brings back memories. Taste is probably the one to go, right? And you think, well, if I lost taste, I wouldn't really have a flavorful life. But in fact, flavor, the word flavor, actually requires both smell and taste. It comes from the Latin root flator. Flator means odor. This is where we get the word flatulence, for example, or for vulgar Latin, to fart. Now, with flator, it's combined with savor. Savor, as you know, is to taste. So something that is savory and has a good odor is flavorful. When we think of the combination between smell and taste, meaning flavor, there's actually a deeper connection to the word taste. Taste actually comes from the Latin root. I'm sort of a word junkie or a word nerd. It comes from taxtare, is the Latin root. And from that, we get the word tactile, which means to touch. So when we touch something, the 2 senses that require contact are taste and touch. The others you can do remotely. You can see things from afar, you can hear things from afar, and at a certain distance, you can smell things. But with touch and taste, it requires you to be in contact with the subject. Now, with taste, it's even more what we call intimate. Not only do you have to touch it, it has to penetrate you. You take that object, you have to put it in your mouth, and you get the full experience. You need to sort of massage it with your tongue to read the subject very accurately. So there's a relationship here between taste and distance, which I'm going to come back to. Also, interestingly enough, that when we think of our very first experiences, actually before you can actually remember, our first experiences with taste obviously come from breastfeeding. And this is why Freud loved to talk about taste. He called this our first pleasure. The first pleasure is oral pleasure. And oral pleasure, let it make sense. Think about it. As a child, you can see things, but you can't really abstract those ideas and make sense of them. It's visual stimuli. With hearing, it's the same thing. You can bring in the sound, but you can't really process it. With taste, however, taste is something that's very immediate. It's something that you can actually make sense of, and it's tactile, and it gives you meaning, it gives you nourishment, so it's actually our first pleasure, a pleasure that we can fully understand right away. In the other sense of the word, it's kind of funny to say the other sense of the word because I'm talking about senses. So sense itself has a double entendre. But taste also does, because we think of taste as relating to preference, right? What is your taste in music? What is your taste in fashion? Indeed, what is your taste in people? The first time that taste is used in this context begins around the 14th century. Taste is used to be a faculty of discernment, to choose from one thing from another. It wasn't until the 17th century that taste is actually used as something that was discriminating as well as having a value, sort of like has a sense of being distinct. This is where we have fine taste, fine dining. And we also have the word bad taste, things that are in bad taste. So that's very interesting. And when we think of taste being directly related to choice, actually, this is a coffee. Has anybody heard of this brand of coffee, Taster's Choice? Right? It's not very tasty, but it very accurately kind of connects these two ideas about taste not only being a sensual kind of experience, but also an intellectual one. You have this like split between the mind and the body, this Cartesian split. When we think of taste as personal style, the best way to reflect our taste is usually through different types of signifiers. These signifiers can take place as the clothing we wear, the brands that we use. They kind of show what your style is, right? My style is quite bland and uncolorful. When we think of how we consume products as humans and as tasters, we voraciously take these objects and we consume them. And the question is, what happens after consumption? There was a philosopher, a Slovenian philosopher named Slavoj Žižek. And he had a very interesting experiment. This experiment involved toilets. And what he did is he looked at 3 styles of toilets. We have here the German toilet. The German toilet has a hole in the front and a platform. So after your consumption, you would do what you have to do. So you would place an object on this flat surface. Now, before you flush the toilet, the German toilet allows you to do something, and that is to experience your feces. So what you would do is you would look at it, you would have an aroma, and you would say, okay, I understand. I flush it, and it goes down. But it's important because that pause, according to Žižek, allows one to inspect one's own waste. And in one's waste are clues for how you live. Now, the French toilet, on the other hand, okay, here's the French toilet. The French toilet, on the other hand, you go through the same processes of step 1 through 3, and then after you kind of eject your feces, it falls into the hole, and it's gone forever. It doesn't allow any room for inspection. It's out of mind, or out of sight, out of body, out of mind, right? It's gone. So there's some sort of expediency in here, and that's what I'm going to return to about waste. Now, then we have the third type of toilet, which is sort of a hybrid between the two. And this is the UK or the American toilet, which we have here. These are filled with water. So after you go through your steps 1 through 3, your object is floating in the water. And with this object, it's sort of between the two, because it says, I am visible, but I'm not to be inspected. And then you flush it. And so what he said, and I'm not going to remember exactly this, so I'm going to pick up my notebook. He said this was, by looking at the toilets and how we dispose of waste actually says something about your culture and how you reflect upon your own lifestyle and your body and your health. He said that for the Germans, the toilet reflected reflective thoroughness. With the French, he said it was revolutionary haste. And for the Americans and for the British, it was utilitarian pragmatism. So there you go with toilets. But it's very important how we look at our waste and its connection to how we consume things. Because our consumption is related directly to our lifestyle. If we think of the life cycle and the lifestyle, those words, if you print them out, they almost look alike typographically. Lifestyle and life cycle. And from this we get the life cycle of products. When we think of the products we buy, there's another component to this, which is privilege. It happens that those, obviously, who consume the most end up wasting the most, right? Because they have to process that material. But the more poignant fact is that those who waste the most also have the privilege of being most distanced from that waste. And this is a very important distinction because it shows that the more affluent you are, the more ability you don't have to reflect on your consumption or your waste. And so this is where I wanted to kind of talk about the connection between these two rhyming words, which are waste and taste. Waste itself, let's look at the word waste. Waste actually comes from the Latin root as well, vaster. And for Germans, you know, the V's and W's sort of are interchangeable, right? So waster, you get waste. But if you use the V, we get from vaster, or you get the word devastation. Devastation has a direct link to waste, to the wasteland, to lay waste to a community, to lay waste to an army. This is a very important if we look at the root of words and how they play out in everyday life. So, if we look at the products we use, we're doing a better job. I think globally, we're moving in the right direction. We can pick up a ream of paper, and sometimes it'll say 80% post-consumer paper. This is good, so you feel good that you're consuming a material that has been through the waste cycle and come back to nature. Actually, Willem Flusser, the author of this book, it's called The Philosophy of Design, The Shape of Things, he says that waste is very important because even whole entire bodies of knowledge are based on waste, such as archaeology. Archaeology is the study of waste, waste through history, things that have been forgotten or disposed of or just been the victims of time. We look at other forms of waste. Ecology is another body of knowledge, and even psychoanalysis in some ways is a study of waste. So if we think of the post-consumer waste products, and instead of reading post-consumer waste, we ought to think first consumer taste. Thank you.